Get a clear insight into the legal processes of the Family Court of Western Australia with divorce and family lawyer Belinda McClelland. Belinda shares her story to becoming a divorce and family lawyer and starting her own practice. Within this conversation, she takes time to talk through the legal process as well as providing some very clear insight and strategies to align expectations in terms of the time and money implications of not working towards an agreement in a proactive fashion. The podcast is super useful for someone who has recently separated and is in the middle of what is an immensely emotional event. However, Belinda also explains how important it is to consider upfront the financial and administrative implications of moving in together with a partner, something so often overlooked. Belinda is a lovely and down-to-earth lady, which goes a long way to dispel some of the myths that many have about lawyers from the outside. So enjoy Belinda. Hello and welcome back to WA Real. I'm your host, Bryn Edwards. Family law is where we're going to today with my guest, Belinda McClelland. Belinda, welcome to the show.
Hi Bryn, thanks for having me on your show.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. So one of the questions I like to ask my guests at the start is how they came to be in Western Australia. Now I understand you were born in Zimbabwe and then moved to South Africa when you were 5 and then came here in, was it 1982 when you were 17?
In 1984, yes.
1984, sorry.
Yeah.
Why did you end up in Western Australia and what was that like?
Okay, so when my parents separated when I was about 9 in South Africa, and my dad later met an Australian lady who lived in a share house with him, and then he decided to immigrate here a few years with her, and I stayed with my mum in South Africa. And then when it got to the time I finished school, I had a choice to either come here or stay and go to university in South Africa. And admittedly, at that time, there was no fees in Australia.
Right.
So it was before, university fees came in. And so it was a hard decision because I had all my friends in South Africa, but I thought, well, I'd come to Western Australia because my dad was here.
Right.
So I did that.
Like?
Well, it was very upset. I was very upset right at the beginning because I'd left all my friends behind. I went to university and I knew nobody at all. Everybody else had somebody to go and have a coffee with, or would sit next to someone they knew in a lecture, and I didn't know anybody at all. So for the first few months, that was kind of upsetting. I wasn't sure. I thought, I've got no friends, and I just knew my dad, and admittedly my dad had married the lady, and actually my younger sister had come out before, and my dad had also had another child, so I had the family that I knew, but other than that, nobody.
Yes, outside of that.
Outside of that. So it took a few months before I even, had the courage to say, do you mind if I join you for a coffee, or,
right.
Just to actually meet people. And, when you're 17, 18, other people are going out to parties, and, it's that time of your life when you, I guess I was having a really good time in South Africa and came here, and no one to go to a party with, no one to go to the movies with, no one to, play with. Yeah, so it took a while, but obviously I got there. Yeah, so and then so I studied at UWA, and then got a job when I finished. I did 2 degrees. Well, 2 degrees, but took 3 years for one. You had to do 1 year of economics or another degree before you could do law. Then I did a Bachelor of Laws, and then a 1 year Bachelor of Jurisprudence, so that means I could get a job. In those days we did articles, so so that's how I got into it.
Right. Were you not tempted to go back to South Africa?
Well, I missed my friends and what have you, but I guess by that stage we knew things politically in South Africa were going to be difficult with political upheaval, apartheid was breaking down. There was high crime rates already, and so there wasn't really a good future for white people in South Africa.
Right.
So to that extent, Australia was, a great alternative.
So is it home now?
It's been home ever since then, yes.
Yeah.
I went back there on a holiday 5 years after I'd been here, and, seen all your friends had moved on, and, and obviously by the time I'd been here 5 years, I started to make friends, and so, yeah, it's a beautiful... South Africa was beautiful as well, beautiful climate.
Some people say there's a lot of similarities between the two.
That's right. So nice climate, beautiful scenery. It's a kind of a similar lifestyle, really, to here, but I guess the difference is certainly in those days, if you open the newspaper, the front page might be, three-legged dog run over, but in South Africa it was like 50 people killed here and 50, so it was certainly a lot safer, and when you're living there, you sort of, you don't realise how unsafe you are until you sort of,
somewhere super safe.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, Western Australia is particularly beautiful. I've now travelled all around, and I do think Perth is such a beautiful city. I walk along the river every day. Or along the ocean, or, I just think we're blessed to be in such a gorgeous state and country.
So you're a practicing family lawyer. You have your own practice, which we're sitting in at the moment. Why law?
Oh.
Why back then?
Well, funny, my dad always tells me that when I was about 12, apparently I was always extremely argumentative, and
right.
and he would say, well,
is that a useful thing?
Well, he would say if I said the sky was blue, you'd say, oh no, it's not, it's cloudy. And he said, what, you should become a lawyer, and that kind of, I suppose, laid stuck in my head. And then when it got to finishing school, you don't really know what you want to do when you finish school.
Absolutely.
So many people, you go, oh, I don't know, what do I, And, but I thought in those days, well, if I do law, it's, at least I know I can get a job at the end of it, because in those days, UWA was the only law school.
Yeah.
And so they were only producing 200, graduates a year, and there was a shortage of lawyers. So you knew you were going to get a job. So I thought, well,
it's a prudent decision on one hand.
I can do that, and if something else comes along, that I really want to do, well, I can always do that. But at least in the meantime, at least be doing something rather than doing nothing. So that was my thinking, and then, in fact, I did law for 2 years, and then decided I hated it.
Really, after UWA?
After UWA, I got my articles, and then. So your first year's articles, you're not really a lawyer. The second year is what they call a restricted practice year. So you're not allowed to go out on your own yet. And anyway, I don't think I was happy with the firm that I was in. And I just thought, I think it was also the whole change from uni, where you've got 6 weeks off over, so many holidays, and this business of suddenly working full time, 8:30 to, and only 4 weeks annual leave a year. It was just, I thought, I can't, I can't do this. So I just gave up, and admittedly I went on to Social Security for 3 months, and then I was offered a job in a settlement agency, and I thought, okay, I'll do that.
Settlement as in building?
Yeah, just buying and selling houses, when you go to a settlement agent for, as I say, when you buy a house. So did that. It was quite straightforward. It was okay. But then I was offered a position in another firm. And I thought, okay, I'll give it one more chance because it seemed such a waste of, getting a law degree too. And that firm was a lot nicer, but I was doing commercial conveyancing, and I guess that was the other thing, is really dry. And in fact that firm, there wasn't a lot of work, so sort of I could see that I was never really going to go anywhere. I was just doing debt recovery and that sort of thing. So and then I was offered a job at a family law firm, and it was just so interesting, and I thought, wow, this is me. I like this, dealing with people, dealing with not well. In fact, the funny thing is that with all that commercial conveyancing background that I had, you realise how very useful that is when you're doing family law, because you're dealing with people's finances. So you need to know what companies are and what trusts are, and you need to know the processes of conveyancing and everything anyway. So it was a really handy background to have. But
if we could just go back to sort of uni articles and things like that. And from an outsider looking in, you always hear that it's hard work, you're getting thraped and slogged. And is it really hard work?
Well, look,
or is it just like any other job?
Well, I was never really striving to be an A student. So, and the first year or two, of course, it was kind of hard work because I was doing economics and maths, and I had no friends anyway. So I spent all my time at uni and kind of, because you had to get good marks in that first year of a different degree before you could even get into law. Right. So, and I did manage to get an A in maths and got in, and I worked hard that year. But then the next year, because you're there for a long slog, and at the beginning, you go to every lecture, do all the work, but you realise how much less you have to do as the years go by, and you know what lectures you can miss and which lectures, and so I had a lot of fun really at uni. I didn't do a lot of summer work at law firms or anything like that. I had a job part-time doing stacking shelves, but the rest of it was, it's a nice age to be and not have a full-time job and have fun. So I guess, I think anyone can really do it. It's not that hard, no.
Right. Because it always seems like something that's clouded in mystique.
No, in fact, I mean, you only have a few contact hours a week, and I wouldn't say I'm some sort of, particularly brainy person, but it's, no, I don't think it's as hard as they make out, no.
Right.
No.
Okay. So you went through the conveyancing, and then an opportunity came up in family law. You mentioned earlier on that it was more appealing, the people aspect.
Yes.
Can you tell me a bit more about
that? Yeah. Well, of course, when you're helping somebody through a breakup, you have to sit down and you really have to find out everything about their lives. So the sorts of things that nobody would ever tell you in a pub, kind of thing, as a friend, if you know what I mean. In fact, you find out the things that they would never even tell their friends. Yes. Because they want to get advice from you. So you find out, what they earn, how they run their finances, what they own. I suppose, so you find out a lot about them, their children, their marriage, how long they've been married for. And the first question is never, and why did you split up with a person? You first need to find out all of the circumstances anyway. And in fact, the reason that they broke up with a person is not even relevant to their claim for property settlement. Yeah. And of course, we also deal with parenting arrangements, so children. Yes. So you're just finding a lot out about people, and you sort of get a lot of insights, and
you see a lot.
You do, and it's interesting, and it's not always the case that the client is in there crying and quite often they've already dealt with it and they just want to sort out their mess kind of thing. So I think I like to help people. I don't want to... so it's kind of like, it's like what you would do with a friend. Oh, come on, why don't we do this? Why don't you do that? And of course, I've got all the knowledge of how they can go about, let's get this sorted for you. And so, because all you want to do now is to be able to get on with the rest of your life. You just want this over and done with. So let's find the quickest way we can get there, the cheapest way we can get there. Yeah. And I feel as if, in a sense, I'm also, like, it's a helping profession, really. Yeah. I know that...
Because people are in the end of a relationship is possibly one of the most difficult things. It's up there with bereavement of a close one.
Oh yes, almost worse sometimes if someone dies, as opposed to if someone leaves you for your best friend. They're really upset. Sort of.
Yeah, the whole world is collapsed in.
Yes.
Yeah, and so it's like the most crucible of a time.
Devastating.
So
that's right.
To actually go in and actually help someone through it.
Yes. Well, that's right. So, I mean, people say to me, well, you're dealing, that must be so hard dealing with in family law, that, all these emotions and whatever. And I suppose I'll say to them, the thing is, they come in, I don't feel the emotion. I'm not feeling upset. It's not my husband. It's not my child. It's not my money. So they come in and I can look at what they have to say objectively and go, look, I know that you might want to, make sure he has nothing left after I'm finished with them. I know that's how you feel. But the truth is that actually the best thing for you, financially and otherwise, is to just, do an amicable separation and sort it out in a fair and amicable, So then if they're hearing that from somebody objectively, that's how I can be of help.
Yes.
I try and, there are times that I suppose when someone tells me the story and the person on the other side really is a bitch or a bastard or, and then I might get a little bit involved or engaged myself because I think, oh, well, bugger that, let's sort him out. Right. But, and so I do care, but mostly I am, as I say, I do feel as if I can help them through it. And most of the time at the end they go, oh, thank you so much. Obviously my work is all on referrals, so we're not all painted with the same brush that some lawyers,
What do you mean by that?
Oh, well, you do hear about, and I think I've seen myself in some of my dealings with lawyers, that you do get the feeling sometimes that they are more worried about how much money they're going to make out of that case than properly sorting it out.
Yes.
And I do have to say I have seen that, just even, maybe it's just the way they deal with it. Instead of being, I'm a real results person. I just want to, let's get to the end. And whereas sometimes you feel as if they are dragging things out, that they're commencing proceedings unnecessarily. Maybe it's maybe it's just that they're incompetent, but I do think some people are in it for the money, I guess, and that's not what drives me. So, we're not all like. I mean, we're not meant to be like that. We're meant to be professionals.
Yes.
The definition, if you like, of being a professional is you treat your client as if it was your sister, or as if it was, you really have to have their best interests at heart. And when that comes into conflict with your own, if, you're thinking you're not getting enough money out of it or something, then you're not really being a professional, you're just being a dirty tradesman or something, you know what I mean? It's, and when I say tradesman, a lot of tradesmen are professionals, that would do it. But, so...
So, for somebody who doesn't quite know or understand, what is the legal process when a relationship breaks down?
That's a good question, and believe me, I think if people knew
That's what I thought. I thought, where do we start? I thought, right, well, let's start with the legal process. What is supposed to happen and how does it happen?
Okay, because as I say, I do think that a lot of people get into relationships without any clue about the fact that what they're doing is they're entering into a financial partnership, which is going to, so if it's, depending on whether you're talking about a children's case or a financial case, but if we're talking about the fact of, say financial.
Well, let's paint a picture of early 40s, come to a finish, 2 kids,
okay,
and house and
yes,
stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, just for the moment, we'll say that the parenting arrangements are kind of agreed, and
okay. So there's 2 parts, isn't there?
Yes, there is. Often, a lot of the time, parenting arrangements are agreed, and everything's fine, and there doesn't need to be.
And that's informally between.
That's informally. Most people can work it out themselves when it comes to kids.
Yeah.
But in relation to their, so when you separate, there's a few things that need to be sorted out. The one is the division of the assets and liabilities.
Yeah.
Because even though things might be all in one name or all in the other person's name, or often they're jointly held, the idea is that when you separate, you need to sever your financial ties, so that you can each get on with your life, that knowing that when you earn money, it's yours, that assets are in your name. So there's that division of assets and liabilities is one aspect. The other aspect is simply, if you were married, is getting divorced. A lot of people confuse divorce with property settlement, but the property settlement is the division of the assets and liabilities.
Yeah.
The divorce is relatively, it's a very easy process that people can do without using a lawyer, and happens 12 months after the separation.
Yeah. Why 12 months?
That's just, you have to, in order to prove that you have grounds for a divorce, you have to have been apart from each other for 12 months.
Right.
With de factos, they can't, well, no. Sorry, I was just going to say, so with de factos, they have to get their property settlement sorted out within 2 years of a separation. But with married people, once you are divorced, you've only got another 12 months after that, if you haven't already done your property settlement to sort it out.
Yeah.
So yes, 12 months. And then sometimes there's a right to one of the parties to claim maintenance, which is, so there's child support on the one hand, but then sometimes there's spousal maintenance. So sometimes people think of it as alimony or whatever, but sometimes that is an issue that arises that needs to be sorted. So yes, it's a whole...
Yeah.
And then if, unfortunately, if they're unable to come to an agreement about the parenting arrangements, then sometimes that needs to be sorted as well. So the aim, of course, is to hopefully try and people... I mean, what I would always say to people, if you've been separated, firstly, don't try and just do it yourself without any advice. Because, I mean, everyone's scared of lawyers. They don't want to get lawyers involved because they're worried it's going to cost a fortune. But I would always say go and get some preliminary advice just as to what you're entitled to, and so that you've got a ballpark idea. And then do it yourself if need be, but first get some advice. So I would, as I say, always recommend getting some advice, but otherwise there's lots of it you can do it yourself. If it's amicable, so even if it's amicable, you can do it, if you get some advice, you can do it in a tax effective way. I mean, people, for example, who own a house and they decide, the husband says, look, I want to keep the house and pay you out to the wife. If they don't get advice and they try and do that between themselves, they probably end up paying stamp duty on the transfer of the house from jointly into the one person's name.
Yeah.
Whereas if they just did an application for consent orders, then there's an exemption from stamp duty. So what are
the consent orders?
So in other words, so when you reach agreement about how the assets and liabilities are to be divided between you, then to make that agreement a final agreement, so that neither of you can come back later down the track for another bite at the cherry, you have to either get court orders that say it's finished, or there is another way called a binding financial agreement, which is a contract, but it also has the effect of finalising things. So, and the point is, any property transfers that are done either pursuant to a binding financial agreement or consent orders is free of stamp duty. So people think they're saving themselves money by just doing it between themselves, but meanwhile, the transfer, they could have saved themselves $10,000 just on stamp duty.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And the other thing is also this business of finalising it. So sometimes people think, oh, we'll just sell the house, we'll divide up the proceeds between us and both go on with our lives. Not realising that that doesn't finish things. And one of the parties might get a girlfriend or a boyfriend who knows the process and says, well, you didn't get any super out of that person, or you could have got more. So 5 years down the track, they put in a claim, and if you'd just done it the proper way at the beginning, they wouldn't have been able to make a claim. So it is. I think people don't hesitate to go to a doctor.
It puts like a book stuff on the end of it, doesn't it? It looks like finished.
That's right. So, as I say, people, don't hesitate to go to a doctor or a specialist when something's wrong with them, but spending some money just to make sure that this is one of the biggest financial transactions you're going to have, is the division of your assets and liabilities.
Yeah.
So it's worth making sure you get it right, and as I say, yes, finalising it.
And is it generally aimed at the 50-50 separation, or just slightly?
No. Every case is different, and it depends on. In the first place, of course, well, there's sort of 3 steps. Firstly, what is in the pie to be divided up? The second step is, what were the contributions made? So if the contributions were equal, you would think that would mean that the assets should be divided equally. But then there's a final area of inquiry, which is whether or not a court might adjust that percentage, that 50-50, because of the future needs of each of you. So, for example, if you had a husband and wife, they've contributed equally, but the wife at the moment is stuck at home with 2 children under the age of 5. The husband's has got a great income. Well, even though they've contributed 50-50, they will probably give the wife a bit extra because she isn't able to go out and earn money. And at the end of the day, she's continuing with her contributions of being the primary parent, of the children, which means dad can go out and work full time because he doesn't have to worry about the care of children. So it sometimes is fair to give her a bit extra. So those are the considerations. And I guess, well, again, if people knew what they were getting into when they started living together, well, no, let me put it another way. I think not enough people do know what they're getting themselves into when they move in together. It's all fun and games, and they don't realise.
When you say that, what are they actually getting themselves into?
Well, it is this financial partnership, right? So.
And when does that start? The moment you move in together?
Well, so let's put it this way. After 2 people have been living together for more than 2 years, and there's some other exceptions to that, but they are treated the same as if they were married, right? But so when you're looking at when you're looking to see, who should get what, you look at what they had when they first started living together, even if they got married later. It's when they first started living together and first joined their finances in effect.
Yeah.
What did they each firstly come into the relationship with? You then look at what they've acquired over the course of the relationship when you're trying to work out this percentage on contributions. But I will just say a lot of guys think that, I can't tell you the number of guys who come into my office and go, well, I paid for everything. I was the only one working. All she did was stay at home, look after the kids, but I'm the one that paid for everything. And this is my house, and they don't realise that the courts are not going to see it that way, that her contributions of being the homemaker, I'm talking about the traditional kind of family setup, is considered equal to you being the one out earning. And the other aspect, which, it doesn't often happen, but if one of you becomes sick or and is unable to work, whether it's mental health issues or whatever, well, then there may be a requirement that the other person support that person financially even after a breakup. I don't think many people realise that. Right. That whole thing of, in sickness and in health, for richer, for poorer, that vow is translated into the actual way the courts will treat, will take it, those are the factors that will be taken into account when a court decides who gets what and what sort of support the other person gets. So I think a lot of people, as I say, just don't realise that. So you should really, I suppose, you might be going out with this girl and she's best fun ever, but she spends all her money and is never, has always got a credit card through the roof, and you're a budgeter. Well, is that really the sort of person you should be settling down with? And you think everything's fine when we're all in love, but she's gorgeous and, she's great in bed, and and who cares? She's a bit silly with her credit card, but who cares? But that will impact, 10 years down the track when, the husband will complain, she just always used to max out the credit card, and, I kept telling her she needs to go back to work. Well, and she won't go back to work. And, people don't talk about these things before they even get together. If we have children, will you go back to work? Are we going to join our finances? And, are we going to agree on a budget and things like that? So
it's kind of serious grown-up stuff. Stuff, isn't it?
Well, it is, especially when children come along. And that thing of, the wife going back to work, that is often a huge cause of breakups, because because they never even discussed it, the wife assumed that once I have children, I'll be able to stay at home. And the husband assumed that she would go back to work, but they've never discussed it. And so, and then that causes, all sorts of... I just see it. Especially, lots of breakups happen where the kids are 4 and 5 or 3 and 2, and the husband wants her to go back to work. She doesn't want to go back to work. Just things they should have talked about beforehand, I guess.
Hotbed of acrimony. Just to close out the explanation of the legal process. You've explained how things go when everybody's sort of getting along. If people don't, then what happens? Is that
okay? So I
presume to start with, it's have a lawyer involved, help mediate, or each person has a lawyer, they exchange. But then, if you don't get to that, then what happens?
Yes. So obviously, that's the preferred way to go, is to try to negotiate an outcome.
Yeah.
But
then that gets culminated in a
at the end,
order, and that gets filed.
That's right, in a consent order.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, there's only two ways that something is going to be resolved. One is by agreement, and the other is by a judge making a decision.
Yeah.
And at the moment in Western Australia, we have a very clogged up court system. They haven't put on enough new judges to match the population growth and to match, even the family court having jurisdiction over de facto couples hasn't been around forever, but they didn't necessarily increase the number of judges. So
to increase the demand.
That's right. So the courts are underfunded, in my view.
Yeah.
So that it's now at the stage where if you commence proceedings, so you've tried to argue, you've tried to negotiate, you've come to a stalemate, there's no way, one person wants 80% of the assets, the other person says, no, you can only have 50% or whatever it is.
Yes.
Then they start proceedings, and the average time to get to trial is 95 weeks. So that's nearly 2 years.
Wow.
Right? And that's if it goes all the way to trial.
To trial. And what are you doing along the way in those 95? So there's like an initial hearing?
Yes, so you prepare your application, you file that, you have your first day in court about 6 weeks later. Mm-hmm. Then orders are made about getting valuations of property or other assets, filing of documents by the other side, a process called disclosure where you have to give each other copies of any documents that you have in your possession that are relevant. Then there is a sort of an in-house mediation type process. It's called a conciliation conference that happens. That happens about 6 months down the track, sort of thing. And then you go into this very long waiting list, waiting for the next step, which is called a readiness hearing. And you get given notice of the readiness hearing about 4 months before the readiness hearing. And that's when you've got to file all your trial affidavits, your evaluations, all the evidence from which you're going to rely on at trial. And then come the readiness hearing, then a registrar will determine whether you are indeed ready to go to trial. And then you're placed in a monthly call-over list, because every month there's more cases that are ready for trial than there are trial dates.
Right.
So you might then go from call-over to call-over every month waiting for your trial date.
Right.
And then eventually you get your trial date.
That's the 95 weeks.
That's the 95 weeks. And then even then, once you've had your trial, the judge doesn't necessarily make the decision on the last day of the trial. You might be waiting another 3 months for the decision to be handed down.
Oh, right.
So, of course, there's a lot of incentive to try and reach agreement along the way, because it's...
How much does that process usually cost in fees from start to finish?
Okay, yes.
No.
I normally quote it in two, if I'm telling, and I give this advice to a client at the first appointment of every new client, so that they know exactly when they're arguing about $10,000, they know what it's going to cost to get a judge to make the decision, because it's not worth arguing over $10,000,
Yeah.
So when I said the stage where you get to that conciliation conference, that's sort of the first 3 months, 3 to 6 months of the procedure. That's probably about $10,000 each.
Yeah.
But to go from where you get notice of the readiness hearing and getting everything ready and actually going to trial, that part's probably between $40,000 and $50,000 per person.
Wow.
So, and of course, these are very modest quotes, depending. I was just talking when you came in with a client just on another matter altogether, but for her matter, and she's not my client, and I'm not the husband, I'm acting for a third party, but anyway, where she spent $340,000 going to trial. So it's, I'm just talking your average house and 2 cars kind of case. Yeah. If that gets to trial, but
it's not. Yeah,
it can be.
The maths don't stack up, do they?
No, so that's So I mean, obviously, when there's millions of dollars, when people don't spend 300,000 unless they've got 300,000, and that there's a couple of million, worth arguing over, I guess.
Yes.
But so it's exorbitant, and it's really should be an option of last resort, and for us normal people.
Yeah.
And so the funny thing is, when you know how long it takes and you know how much it costs, there's a barrister once said to me, and I've always said this to clients since I heard it because I thought it's so true. He said, the only people that go to trial are people that are either mad, bad, or greedy. And sometimes all three. Because
Bad,
or greedy. Because most people can work it out. It's not that hard. Even if your lawyer's saying you're entitled to 60% and the husband is saying, no, I'm only going to give you 50%, well, it doesn't take you too much to work out that the 10% you're arguing over is only, 15,000. No point spending 50,000 to get 50,000, or, so why do they go to trial? Because they're mad, really. And when someone's mad, you can't rationalise with them. You can't say, well...
This brings me on to my next question. This is a very straightforward, logical process. And, like the law is the law. It tends to be, dare I say, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like quite a cold instrument. It is what it is. This is the process that we're going down. But as we said right earlier on, breakup of your relationship is up there with the death of it's some of the most emotive parts. So how did you end up managing this, this very clear, logical, left-hand side of the brain process, which ultimately has the ultimate say in the matter, because if people don't agree, then we're off to court and somebody else is going to make a decision. How do you reconcile and manage the fact that people are probably fired up out the right-hand side of their brain and hugely emotional? He's a wanker, she did this, he did that, they screwed, all the business. How do you manage the two? Because that's got to be the skill of your job.
Yes, that's right. So
and probably why it's more fun than building combatants.
Yeah. I mean, I was saying before about some lawyers, especially in family law, this is my difficulty with some lawyers, is that they take advantage of the fact that their client is upset and angry, and they can sometimes feed it,
Right.
because that means that the client's not going to want to settle, and yes, let's go, So yes, I feel my job as a professional is, and especially in family law, is to try and take the heat out of it, and to make sure that, for example, when I'm writing to the other side, that you can be quite provocative if you want to be,
yes,
or you can keep it nice and flat.
Yes.
And so I feel
kind of neutral.
That's right. And I mean, sometimes, of course, your letters are strategic, and you do, but you also have a duty not to inflame the situation. And I guess with clients, I try to, I just try to explain it from, as you say, from the, I say, well, I know that's how you feel about it, but this is the way a court's going to look at it. So this is the problem. Do you really want to spend your money? And so you can try and rationalise with them. And most people you can, even if they're upset. Frankly, I do also sometimes have to say to a client, if you want me to do that, I don't agree with that. So I'll say, look, I don't think you should do that. I think sometimes, for example, I've had even just not that long ago where a dad's going, well, I want her to, just say he wants her to settle 50-50 and she's wanting more. And he says, well, how about I use the children, like as leverage? I mean, I'll say, if you don't give me this, I'm going to go for 50% custody of the children. and then I've really got to say to him, no,
it's a shitty place to be.
No, you can't be. I try not to be judgmental when I'm talking to them. I say that's not going to be going down well. If the family court got wind of that, that would not be approved of. I try not to say, I think you're an arsehole for saying that. I try.
Humanity do.
Yeah, and if they insist on going down that path, I have had to sometimes say, look, I've given you my advice on what you should do. If you don't want to follow that advice, you're paying me really good money. Perhaps it's best that you find, that you go somewhere else.
Who will do that?
Because sometimes people just want that kind of a lawyer too. So there are lawyers that'll go, yep, come on, let's whatever, So that's right. So it is, but it's that heightened emotion aspect, I guess, which I like about it too. It's not just
because it strikes me that people can often go into this in a very adversarial, I'm going to win type thing. But in theory, nobody's winning.
Except the lawyers.
Yeah. If you carry on like that. It's more a case of, look, you're going to lose. You are losing. You're losing the end of a relationship. You're going to lose part of your property and assets. You're not going to be seeing your kids every day like you used to. You're losing. You are losing. Like, suck it up, get used to it.
Yeah.
Reconcile it within yourself, and then understand what you're willing to lose and what less so. And
what's the best possible outcome for you? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, given that
the fact that winning across the board is not happening.
No, that's right. No one wins in family law.
No.
That's exactly right. It's the best outcome is a fair and equitable settlement, which is reasonable, which is as cheap as possible.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm right in understanding, aren't I, that the legal process that it just treats the separation as a separation. It doesn't matter who did what. It's
a no-fault jurisdiction.
Or who did who.
That's right. It was different before 1975. Family Law Act was amended in 1975 to make it a no-fault jurisdiction. But before that, there was an element of, if there's adultery, you could get more money or that sort of thing. But I think it was the right thing to do to remove that, because that caused all sorts of problems with proving who was at fault. And, as you know, often when a relationship breaks down, it's not necessarily one person's fault or the other person's fault.
There's a whole
exactly. There's a number of reasons why. I mean, sometimes, the one person is, at fault in the sense of leaving the person for another person doing a Barnaby Joyce or whatever, that's...
Yeah.
But, yeah.
What are some of the common sort of blockages that you see towards getting to a fair and equitable outcome? Because you must see a whole pattern of them nowadays. Having done it for as long as you have.
Yes. Well, as I say, the mad, bad, greedy comment, if you might have a reasonable client on your side, but if the other side, the thing I'm most scared of for a client is when the other side is happy to cut their nose off to spite their face. In other words, they are of the view that if I can't get the house, nobody will get it.
Right, yeah.
That sort of attitude. And because what can you do there? So you feel so sorry for your client because, it's not like she could say, well, look, I don't care, give him more, but he doesn't want more. He wants to punish you,
Yes.
and if they like that, I'd have to say those are the most difficult cases that I come across, and that's in the financial zone.
They're the ones that will spend 20 grand to fight for 10 grand.
That's right. And then of course when children are in the mix as well, that even becomes more tragic, because or it might be the wife sometimes who is so angry because of the fact that he's left her or whatever, and is going to say, well, he can never see the children again, and if somebody's determined to alienate the children from the other side, they can do it, believe me.
Yeah.
So that deliberate parental alienation, those cases are extremely difficult. And, you know, they don't happen all the time. Most people work it out. But those cases are the most challenging. Because there's not really much a family court can do.
Yeah.
You know, when the mother who's the primary carer of the children, who the children are most attached to, you know, because she's been the stay-at-home mum, and they might have an okay relationship with their dad, but their dad was always out at work, and so they did only just see the dad on the weekends. And even though the court and everybody says, look, it's in those children's interest to have their dad in their lives, if she's determined to make them hate their dad, my goodness, a mum has so much influence over children. And then, you know, what can the family court do? You know, you can't force a person to be a good parent, can you?
No, unfortunately not. No. Question that I was curious to ask is, I suppose one of it might seem contentious, but are men and women treated fairly in the court throughout this process?
Yes, that's a common question, really. Yeah. I mean, certainly a lot of...
You've just brought one up there where, you know, mothers have the ability to parent, alienate, and, you know, very much male role is to go out, be away, and then all of a sudden they see what happens when they spend the time away. And you know, so there's all the different sort of play-outs of the archetypal roles. But
yes,
I'm just interested in your view, if you know.
Well, look, I mean, I think certainly the intention is there to be fair to all parties.
Yes.
And there's no conscious bias one against the other. The fact of the matter is, really, the studies show that certainly financially, those stay-at-home mums, even though they end up getting 60%, which seems, you know, lots of girls think that's really unfair. I'm the one that earned all the money and now she's getting 60% of it, you know. But down the track, an overwhelming number of times, dad will catch up and overtake mum again, and she will be left with only that 60. You know what I mean? So financially, usually, you know, just the way men earn more generally than women, and so they are generally down the track financially much better off. And I suppose the family court does know that. Yeah. And I mean, so many women end up at, you know, 50 years old, they don't have any super, they might have got, you know, the house, but they don't have anything, or they've got the house with a mortgage and they've been paying that and they don't earn very much. So in a way, I suppose things are skewed against women, you know, anyway. And then so I suppose financially I could say that because of the fact that the traditional setup is that the women are at home with the children, they are going to get a bit more of the property settlement, but the dad usually earns more and is usually going to recover, not always. And of course, sometimes it happens the other way, that the wife is the one that earns the money, you know. And I mean, it's not, so that it is, things are changing, and sometimes I think it's quite unfair in a way, because even when women earn more, typically they do more of the housework and more of the child caring. So if you've got a household where husband and wife earn the same, usually her contributions are much greater, but she still only gets 50% kind of thing, you know. So
what about when it comes to the parenting
side? The care of the children. All right, yes. So I've been doing it a long time. So I was here before before John Howard brought about some quite substantial changes to the legislation. So that before that, I can say that your average regime for men with children was that they would have every second weekend with the kids and half the school holidays.
Yeah.
That was kind of a very typical arrangement.
Yeah.
And it sort of, I suppose, worked in the sense that quite often the typical situation was mum was the stay-at-home mum. And so the children were used to, that was the role, that was the agreement between the husband and the wife when they were together, is that she would stay home and look after the kids and he would go out and do the income earning. And so I suppose that every second weekend and half the school holidays sort of reflected that kind of thing. But then there was a significant men's lobby, and they brought in changes which were supposed to try and even up things a bit. And so what they said is that basically parents have equal parental responsibility upon the separation, and if there's no violence, so that there is equal parental responsibility, then the court must look at why shouldn't dad have 50% of the time? Why shouldn't there be an equal caring arrangement? And so my observation once that law was passed was that the typical arrangement since that legislation wasn't that men had 50-50 care, but certainly they were now having quite often a long weekend, so go from the Thursday to the Tuesday, so that they would have more of a say with taking the kids to school and picking them up from school, and more, instead of just being the fun weekend dad, they would have more of a day-to-day, which I think is a great development. I think, and I wish dads would have more, spend more time with their kids, even before separation, and because I think that's the way society should go, in my view. But the only other observation I would have is that sometimes the men will go, they separate. They know that if she's got primary care, then she might get an extra 10% of the property settlement, but also she'll get more child support.
Yeah.
So then it's like, I want 50-50 care, and suddenly, and I do call them this, I'm sorry, they become born again fathers. Suddenly, with having no interest in the children or very little interest in the children prior to separation, suddenly there's this newfound interest and wanting to spend, so there's the ones that genuinely do want to have equal time for the right reasons, but sometimes it is also sort of used as a bit of a weapon kind of thing. Yeah, that's right. So it just depends on the... and frankly, if they are kind of a born-again father, but it means that the kids are now having a better relationship with their dad because their dad, for the first time, is having them on his own for the weekend, or, then that's great too. I think that's a welcome development in things. So...
Yeah. Another question that popped up, I thought I'd ask you, was because you deal with people right at the end of a relationship.
Yes.
Have you started to see patterns which have led to that end of the relationship, or do you only deal with what's happening right at the end?
Patterns.
You see what I mean?
Yes. Okay. So. I guess my observation...
Patterns of... that's what... I mean, I think you sort of mentioned one earlier on when kids are like 3 or 4 years old.
Yes.
And he wants her to go back to work. And then
yes.
comes to sorts of acrimony
That's right. So, and then plus there's also the other thing, when the children are 2 and 3, whatever, that really changes things for that relationship, doesn't it, when people have children. And I do think... things become not as much fun anymore, in a way. It really changes life, doesn't it, when you have children? No longer are you free, easy, single, can do what you like, have fun, and so sometimes it's kind of, I think, I do just think that's a difficult time. Women maybe, once there's been a couple of children, perhaps aren't as interested in the whole affection and that side of things. I think that's a common thing that I've...
Affection, intimacy, sex, yeah.
Yeah, so there's less of that going on. So there's that aspect. The other aspect is, as I said, this difference in their financial goals, I guess. So if one person's a spender, oh, what the hell, life is short, come on, let's go on another holiday. And the other person is, bloody hell, I work hard for this money, come on, we need to save up for our super, we need to, that's going to cause friction, and that can also be, that's always a disaster. And I do think if they've got different financial goals, or that would be often a cause for a breakup. My observation is that men generally, don't leave their wives unless there's another woman, or they don't often just break up.
Yes.
It's often because there is somebody else. Yes. And it might be because they were upset in the relationship anyway, but it takes perhaps another person to give them the courage to actually go. Whereas women, I think, not as often it's because they've met another man, but sometimes it is just because they've had enough of, bad habits maybe, or, and of course violence is sometimes an issue, and, that's a whole nother ball game there. The coercive, controlling behaviour and behaviours and that kind of breakup, which is obviously a good reason for breaking up there. So, you do sort of see these things, patterns. I mean, I'm always surprised these days. I've become so, jaded, I guess, about the whole thing. I'm always surprised when I see a relationship that's working. I go, oh my God, really?
Well, you seem to lead from one question to another that I've written down. I was going to ask, how does this affect you in relationships and how you view your friends and their relationships?
Yeah. Well, as I say, I'm always very... Well, when I see a relationship that is working, I do have a friend and they've got a fantastic relationship, and that's wonderful. But I do think, I suppose I perhaps foresee problems more than, than other people. All I can say is personally, I think it's somehow put me off.
Right.
And I think I don't know. I'm afraid it possibly has had that effect, or maybe it was just me. That I would have become that way anyway. But I'm really happy on my own.
Right.
So I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's. I'm not saying it'll never happen, but I just I've given relationships a red hot go. Don't get me wrong. I have tried and been there, and I've had my own family law issues in a sense, my own little file. But well, as I say, they say that 50% of marriages these days are breaking up. I keep going, well, where are the 50% that are working? Because that's I feel as if that's all I ever see is the ones that aren't working.
Yeah, well, probably because of what you do.
What I do, but even, anecdotally, I suppose.
Where are those 50%? And what do they look and feel like? And what are they doing that keeps them
there? Yeah, or are they just stuck? Can't afford to break up, or
simmering tension.
No.
So throughout all of this journey with the family law, what have you learnt about yourself?
I think when I first went to uni, I thought it was a fluke that I'd even got into uni. And then when I got into law, I thought, that's a fluke. I couldn't believe I'd get the marks to even get there. I don't know, they must have stuffed it up somewhere, And then I thought, no way anyone's going to employ me. And then I did get a job, and wait till they find out the real me, they're not going to... And I guess...
Imposter syndrome.
Yes, and then as I've gone along the journey, I've become more and more confident, I guess, in myself. And I finally got to the point where I go, well, actually, I am good at my job. And I do deserve to be here, and it's not a fluke. And so that's been good for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I can imagine, as we alluded to earlier in this conversation, being a lawyer brings a certain amount of expectation with it, just the very nature of it all. And so therefore that must demand high expectations and standards, which to be a lawyer is you think you need to
I probably looked up at them as well and thought, oh, I can't believe
when one of the one of the nice things of this conversation is just to find out that lawyers are very human too.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. So I can only imagine the journey of having to actually be comfortable in it and own the role.
Yeah.
Yourself.
Yeah. And that I think I've throughout my life I've suffered a lack of self-confidence. So it really has been good for that to feel I know what I'm doing and I can feel positive, and so that it's been good.
So what do the next 3 to 5 years look like for Belinda?
So I've been I have a daughter, 11-year-old daughter, and my care of her has obviously I've had to my career and work has been around my care of Ruby, and I've enjoyed doing that. But I suppose so now she's in high school this year, and so I've never been able to properly work full time or whatever. So I'm hoping I've got to get her through high school and that I want to be the sort of parent that is there when she comes home from school, at least, I don't want to be working long nights and weekends, I want to be a parent. So for me, getting her through high school, I guess, is my goal at the moment. And then, I'd like our practice to become, more profitable, I suppose. Julie and I probably don't charge as much as we should, so we're a bit sort of over generous, and we've got to sharpen up a bit, and I don't want to put clients off ever coming to me, but we should be a little bit less generous and soft with people.
What do you do to keep yourself grounded in all of this? It's quite a...
Yeah. Ruby, my daughter, brings me down, being a parent. What I discovered a few years ago, because what I was doing is, I would get a bit frazzled by the end of the day, and you get home and it's kind of hard to stop thinking about it. You've got all these things going through your mind, and so admittedly I do get home and I have a glass of wine and but what I really found is going for a walk in the morning before work has been a godsend, and not because of not because of getting fit, not because of weight, but all because of how much easier it is to deal with stress. And approach the day. And so, you go for a walk, you get home, and instead of thinking, oh, now I've got to do breakfast, I've got to do this, it's like, right, okay, come on, breakfast time, And so that has been a really good technique to deal with stress. And then other than that, so I get home from work, I have a glass of wine, put some classical music on, a classic FM, and I play Words with Friends. That's my little, I'm a bit of a gamer. I enjoy that. I don't really have a lot of time to watch TV, so I've only got a couple of hours, if you know what I mean, to relax. So I don't watch TV because I have enough drama, you know, in my every day. I've got a whole lot of episodes. Every file I see that, you know, the next episode, so I binge on drama all day, every day.
I like that.
So I don't need to watch TV. I like to go to bed early because I can get up early. I like my 8 hours sleep. I'm very strict on 8 hours sleep, so I go to bed, you know, 8:30, read a bit, and then I'm up at 5 in the morning. So not much of a life, I know, but it's getting me through at the moment anyway.
And the last question I like to ask all my guests is, you know, based on much of what was talked about today, if you could take a little nugget of information and load it up into the collective consciousness so everybody just got it, what would that be?
I think you described it as an aha moment. That's a really difficult question to put it all into one. As I said, I've had little things that happen as I go that I think, oh, you know, Bryn. I mean, I think, as I said, the thing about realising that you can be happy on your own, you know, that you don't, I suppose, just working out that when I finally realised I'm on my own, I don't have to have a partner to make me happy. You know, I'm not saying you can't be happy with a partner, but the only person that's going to make you happy is you. And that to me is really important. It's been huge for me. It's really taken, it's such a relief actually to, you know, not that you don't have to have a partner, and a partner's never going to make you happy either. No. It's only you that's going to make you happy. And so that was, for me, that's been a huge thing for my life anyway.
I like that.
I don't know. That's not for everyone, but
no. And you know, I've spoken to relationship counsellors on the podcast before who said something similar within the relationship itself, that it's not, you know, to look to the other to make you happy is a route to worry.
It's never going to work.
It's never going to work.
So, but the problem with me is that I've realised I'm so bloody happy on my own that I don't even think I want to have a relationship with anyone, because I don't want to spoil how good it is at the moment.
Indeed. If people want to come and find you, where do they find you?
Well, am I allowed to say the name of the firm? Okay, so it's McClelland Lawyers. Which is just me and Julie, but McClelland is just, they can Google it. I've got a website. Most of the people that come to see me is word of mouth, so that's how we generally get work. But if I get any clients through this, that'll be wonderful.
Indeed. Belinda, thank you very much for your time. It's been fascinating to hear how this all works from the other side. And just to listen to your wealth of experience and you know, the patterns that you must see. It's been great. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Bryn. It's been great to talk to you too. Thank you.